Good morning. Welcome back to Server-Side Web Development. This is lecture 10. Today's topic is authentication. So we're going to learn about how we can implement authentication inside of our Laravel website, and then how we can use how we can get access to the authenticated user, and how we can restrict pages to only those users who are logged in. All right. But before we begin, are there any questions? Okay. Judging from the silence, we'll assume there's no questions and we'll go ahead and get started with authentication. There isn't a lot to cover today, so this should move quickly. All right. So, authentication is when we refer to authentication, we're talking about the process of verifying a user when they come to the page. So, this is the whole idea of a login system, having a user to be able to register with our site and then log in to identify who they are. Now, Laravel has made this very easy to implement authentication and to add it to our existing site using the artisan command. Now, we've used the artisan command before for creating controllers and creating models. Well, we can also use the artisan command to implement and add authentication. Now, authentication does, when you're using the Laravel's authentication implementation, it does require to have a users table. Now, fortunately, Laravel has provided the migration file for that users table. So we'll just need to migrate to run a migration to create that table for us. And then we'll be all set to go with authentication. Um, in addition with that, Laravel also provides a UI. There's the Laravel UI package, which I'll demonstrate, or I'll show you how we can install that in the next slide. And with that package, it creates a whole authentication scaffold as well. So we're not having to build the forms or the visuals, the CSS for those forms for the registration form or the login form. All right, so that is what we'll get with authentication. Now let's see how we actually implement it. All right, so in this slide, everything that will be in this slide is to be run in the terminal. So that's either the Mac terminal or the Laragon terminal. We'll run these commands. So, and here are the commands. You'll run each command one right after another once they're done. So the top one, the very top one, it will install the Laravel UI. Now, this is an extra first-party package developed by Laravel, but it doesn't come when we install Laravel normally. So we need to add it. So we're going to use Composer to retrieve this package. Once that package has been installed on our machine, then we can add the authentication to our project. So this is where our artisan command comes in. So of course we do PHP artisan. That's always, PHP always comes before the artisan command. Then we do the UI, and then we can select what type of UI framework we want to use. Currently, there are three choices. You can use Bootstrap, Vue, or React. So I just chose Bootstrap because that's the least complicated. But of course, for those of you who are in the web production course, you might be interested in using Vue. I will say that when you install Vue, you're also going to get Bootstrap as well, because Bootstrap gets installed for the CSS framework. That's what Laravel uses for their CSS. So you're going to get Bootstrap and Vue as well. So then you choose your what kind of framework you want to use, and then you add the --auth auth, and this will add the authentication package. This will allow us to have the login and registration to our existing Laravel project. So all of these commands, by the way, should run after you've created your site. So you have an existing Laravel site, and then you run these commands. After you've ran this command, you're going to want to run npm install. This will install any of those package dependencies you want or you might need. The Bootstrap, the Vue, the React, depending on which of these frameworks you decided to go with, this will install all those dependencies. So it's very important that you run this command. Once you have all these run, you'll also want to run the migrate, the artisan migrate. This will create the users table for you. Again, when you create a new Laravel project, the user migration files are already stored in the migration folder. So all you need to do is run this command, and it will create that folder with your designated database. Once you've ran all of these commands in your terminal and you go to load in your website, you're going to see a difference in the page. So normally we just see this right here, but once we've added the authentication, you'll notice that we'll have these two login and registration links. This is what's been added with the authentication. So Laravel has automatically added these links for us and created the forms for us as well. So this would be the login form. So we have a form that will accept the email address for the user as well as the password. And it will also have the registration for us with the name, email, and password. And this will allow us to register a user. So this is essentially what authentication is doing for us. It's giving us a way of registering users with our site and then allowing them to log in so that we know who they are. And that's important if we want to customize a website for them or to restrict pages to just those users who are logged in. All right, so we're going to see how we can do that in a small level, very easy level way. All right, so we're going to talk next about working with users. Now, this is users. When I refer to users here, this is users who have logged in. How do we get their data, or how do we restrict pages to just those users? All right, so Laravel makes it easy to get information from authenticated users. We can do this using the auth class. So there's a specific class that is used to retrieve the data for the authenticated user, the user who is logged in. And it is also possible to restrict pages to just authenticated users using some middleware. Now, middleware is a special type of package with Laravel. They're sort of special programs that run in between the sort of the view and the controller. We'll never have to write middleware, especially not in this class. We'll only be using it, and really we're only using it for this authentication. All right, so let's see some examples here. So let's say, for example, we have a book site, and this book site will allow users to kind of have a list of books that's their books. So when the user logs in, we'll be taken to the home page, and from that page, it should list out the books that belong to them. Well, how do we do that? Well, we can use that auth class to identify the user's ID. So, for example, if we were in the books controller, this is our controller, which is allowing us to control each page that represents the book. In this case, we're talking about the home page because we're looking at the index method. Now, this index method is going to retrieve only those books that belong to a specific user. So we'll use the book method and then the where clause, the where method, which is similar to the where clause. And we'll say where the user ID of the book is equal to the authenticated ID. All right, so this is if the ID of the user that's logged in, then I want to return just those books, the view to display just those books. So it's going to get just those books, and we're going to return it to the books view. Then inside the books view, we might want to display to customize the page to view the user's name so that the user will know, hey, this is your books. We can get the user's name by using, again, auth and then user here. And then we'll do the little thin arrow, dash greater than name. So this is the column of the user that's logged in. So when we have the registration, you notice there was a name, an email address, and a password. Well, here we're getting the user's name. All right, and then we're just listing out the books down below. And essentially, that's all we need to do with authentication. And that is all you're going to need to do for your final project. All right, so that is with retrieving users' data. But now, what happens if we want to restrict a page? So, for example, this books page that we're displaying here really should never be seen by somebody who is not logged in. So we need a way of restricting this only to users who are logged in. Fortunately, there's a couple ways we can do that. All right, so when we need to restrict access to a page, we have two ways of doing that. We can do it by a page by page basis, or we can do it by a whole controller. All right, so the top example here, we're going to be inside of our web.php. And we're going to say that if you see this root right here, this root that's /books, make sure that in order for someone to see this, that they are authenticated. And this is where that middleware comes in. So here's where a normal root would look like. We have our get method, we have our path /books, and then we have the link to the controller. So books controller at index. That's what we just saw on the previous slide. Well, we want to restrict this to just authenticated users. So we're going to do a -middleware auth. Okay, so what this is going to do is this is going to run through the authentication and check to see if there's a user that's authenticated. If there isn't, a user that's not, someone who's coming to this who's not logged in would just get a 404 because essentially this root won't exist for them. All right, but if they are logged in, then they will be able to go to this controller and the controller will run, get the books, and display the page. Now, if you're going to be restricting an entire section, say all books, so they shouldn't be able to view the books, they shouldn't be able to add books, edit books, any of that, then you might want to add this middleware authentication to the entire books controller. And you can do that by adding this function right here. Now, this does not change depending on your controller. This is for every controller that you want to add this authentication restriction to, just add this code exactly. And it can be added anywhere in the controller. Usually we put the constructor at the top, but again, it can be added anywhere. And what this will do is that it will actually, the constructor gets run anytime the class is invoked. So anytime we're hitting any function inside or any method inside the book controller, this function will get run first. So it's going to check for authentication first for all pages. So again, this is just for one page. The root is just for one page. This is for all the pages associated with book controller. Right? And that's pretty much it. That's all there is for authentication. For the beginning level. There's a lot more you can do with authentication, obviously, but at this point, with where we're at, this is all we really need to know. We just need to know how to set up authentication for our site, then how to get the authenticated user's data, their ID, their name, their email address, and then how to restrict the pages to just those authenticated users. And we've covered that. All right, so are there any questions? Because I did feel like I went through that rather fast. All right, it's a very quiet group today. That's okay. All right, so that's it. Let's talk about, we just do have just one more assignment. This is the reflection, the final project reflection. I don't think I had mentioned this before, but you do have a reflection, just like your midterm reflection. You have a final project reflection. And again, this is just to reflect on what, reflect and write about what you did in your project, the problems you faced, what you learned, right? Just like you did for the midterm, we're just doing this for the final. And this is due August 12th, the same time as your final project. So they're due kind of together. All right, and that will be your last assignment for the course. And that also does wrap up this final lecture as well. I did tell you it was going to be a very short lecture because there just isn't that much we need to cover for authentication. So just to let you know what's going to be happening moving forward, next week is a work period. So I will be here. We'll still have a Zoom meeting, or a Zoom meeting will be here. It is optional to come because, again, nothing is going to be shared. But I will be here if you do have any questions, or if you want to have me look over your code or whatever there is, that would be a time to do it. I am also holding office hours this week. If you missed that announcement that came out yesterday, I am holding office hours this week. I had one yesterday, and I'll have one and two more on Thursday and Friday. Do refer to the announcement on Brightspace to see when those times are for those office hours. Okay. And office hours, again, are a time for you to come and ask questions or have me look over your code or whatever. All right. So just a reminder of outstanding assignments. You still have hybrid number 4. That is due next week. So make sure you're watching those videos and completing the writing assignment for that. Then you have your final project task manager, which is due August 12th, and as well as the final project reflection, which we just talked about, which again is due August 12th. Okay, that is all I have. So are there any questions?
I have a question. For this authentication methods, two methods, could you talk about more specifically for the final projects? Because I tried and I'm kind of I didn't get how to apply this authentication for the final projects.
What exactly are you referring to? Are you trying to implement the authentication, or are you trying to get access to the authenticated user?
Yeah, I already installed the authentication. I can see the login buttons.
Okay.
Yeah. But for the user, they're gonna have there's a more pages. I don't remember that. But after the user log in, they're gonna be the different pages get to. And how, do we need to apply this authentication methods to the
Right. So when you create when you implement the authentication, add the authentication to your Laravel project. In addition to, and I didn't cover this in the slides, but in addition to the login as well, the login and registration, Laravel also creates what is called a home controller and a home view. And what happens is when you log in as a user, you're taken to that home view through the home controller. And now that home view, all it does by default is just kind of display a hello and the user's name. But that, if you wish for this project, you can override or change that home view, the home blade file, to then display the user's list. You wouldn't have to create your own, and that is already set up with the restrictions in mind. So you can't get to that page unless you're logged in.
Okay, and for this book controller.php and the books blade PHP, we do need to apply these methods both for the project.
Yes, you will need to apply this. Now, obviously, for example, you wouldn't have like books controller, you might have lists controller or groups controller, whatever you call it. And then you would have you'd already have your model created that would get your group. Say you're trying to get all of the lists for the user, you would do something like group where user ID auth ID, right? Because then you want to get just those groups that are associated with the user.
And do we also need to like add the column group into the database?
So the migration files that were provided for you, if you migrate those to your database, it will create the tables, and you should not have to make any changes to those tables. They should have everything that you will need to complete this assignment.
Oh, that's good. Did you update the migration files recently? Because
They were the same as last terms. I haven't made any changes to them.
oh, that's great. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? All right. So since this is our last lecture and there's a good opportunity I might not see the rest of you, I do want to thank everybody for attending for this term and bearing with the situation that we've had with moving these courses online. I know many of you definitely didn't sign up for just having online classes like this. So I do thank you for bearing with that. I do hope you found this course useful, and I hope you learned from this material. Um, and I do want to make another shout out that the surveys are available for the courses already. So I do want to ask that you do take some time to fill out those surveys. I do personally look over them and do try to make adjustments to the courses based off of students' feedback. This is especially important this term since we did move online this term. Getting that feedback will be very helpful as we will be teaching online again next term. All right, so that is all I have. I do want to thank you again for coming and wish you good luck on your finals.